Very warm greetings everyone. I am Shivalika Chaturvedi and I am pursuing fashion designing at Arch College of Design and Business here in UNESCO's World Heritage Site, Jaipur. Jaipur is a designated example of how a thought-through design promotes adaptivity, sustainability and is timeless, just like our lungis. Not just because Rajinikanth has done them, but because of their promising adaptivity and functionality. Similarly, our saris, unisize with minimal grading waste. Coming to waste, in our design school we observed a 25 feet tall garment made out of the waste generated in the form of test fits and redos to symbolize the concept of changing room and incessant production and to create an awareness about the created obsolescence in the fashion industry. The garment, which was 25 feet tall and made out of test fits and redos, symbolized circular design, circular economy, and how cradle to cradle is the future of fashion.
As a fashion student, I have always been practicing sustainability at heart to ensure that ecology as well as economy to be well balanced enough. When the member of the communities commit to take this traditional culture into future, this traditional culture becomes art forms, employing the local craftsmen and helping them financially. So this is how we can put the sustainability into life.
If you look at India and if you look at the entire fashion practice of India, sustainability, circular fashion, whatever we may call it today, it has been a very intrinsic part of our culture. If you look at sustainability, the entire concept of kantha, reusing, repurposing old saris and creating a completely spectacular textile out of it was something which was sustainable fashion. And if you look at circular fashion, for us the hand-me-downs were not something to be ashamed about. It was our heirloom. It was something that we always cherished with pride. And that is what Indian fashion, Indian culture is all about.
It's true. Sustainable and ethical fashion goes beyond just the piece of garment that you wear. Every piece of sustainable fashion that you pick up is intricately woven with stories of hard work from innovators and conscious producers who not only look at the fabric itself, but the entire life cycle from raw material, procurement, design, end-of-life management, and how can they ensure minimal waste in this entire production chain and minimal impact on the environment.
Sustainable fashion or eco-fashion is a movement to foster change in the fashion ecosystem towards greater ecological integrity and social justice and goes beyond just textiles and products, but addresses an entire process through which clothing is produced and how long it lasts before clogging our landfills. The Circular Design Challenge, supported by the UNEP, has produced a series of mind-boggling innovations in textile design, source material, and its purpose and aim towards larger goals beyond sartorial fashion. This panel examines some ways forward in how what we wear can transform our lives. Be inspired. Innovations in fashion, sustainable textiles that can set trends for the future. Atul Bagai, Pavithra Muddaya and Satyahit Vetoskar in conversation with Archana Surana. Atul Bagai is the country head of United Nations Environment Programme's India office. After the UNEP established its footprint in India in 2016, Mr. Bagai has decisively led from the front to fulfill its mandate across climate change, chemicals, waste and air quality, environmental governance, resource efficiency, environment under review, healthy and productive ecosystems, and resilience to disasters and conflicts. Pavithra Muddaya's work of over 47 years has been primarily in handloom design development and guiding weavers, apart from documenting motifs, techniques, designs, and oral history to achieve a very successful growth, facilitating the journey from weaver to entrepreneur. She set up Vmore, a home store, in 1974 with her mother. Vmore has effected 5 million employment days for weavers' livelihoods till date. Pavithra is the managing trustee of Vmore Handloom Foundation, established in 2004, and chief curator at Vmore Museum of Living Textiles. Satyahit Vetoskar, an architect from Sir J.J. College of Architecture, Mumbai, and an industrial designer from the Industrial Design Center, IIT Mumbai, founded the design studio Rubber Band in 1998, which embodied the belief of stretching one's creativity to its maximum potential. His expertise and interest lies in exploring various materials and technologies. In 2018, he created an award-winning brand, Bandit, which is a space for sustainable design. It has won 4 design awards, including the Lexus Design Award 2021 and the Lakme Fashion Week Circular Design Challenge 2021. Archana Surana is a design educator, mentor, and social entrepreneur with 28 years of experience innovating in design education. She successfully carries forward a legacy of 22 years as the founder and director of the Arch College of Design and Business. As the founder and director of ARCH College of Design and Business. A social entrepreneur and feminist, her contributions in youth and women empowerment have gained her recognition from former Indian President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam as a Yuva icon.
We all know that the fashion industry is a crucial economic sector and one of the biggest polluting industries globally. Did we really know that? Yes, we've got a couple of facts here. The fashion industry today contributes to $2.4 trillion to the global manufacturing sector, employs over 300 million people worldwide across the value chain. Many of them are women. Is responsible for an estimated 2 to 8% of world's greenhouse gas emissions. The industry also consumes around 215 trillion liters of water per year. Despite the fashion industry being a $1 trillion industry, workers still face low wages and unsafe working conditions. We are wearing clothes for a shorter time duration, resulting into millions of tons of cast-offs giving the landfills each year. Now, if this is the scenario worldwide, we have a greater responsibility today. So my first question here, before I go to Mr. Bagal, is that given the size of the global reach, unsustainable practices within the fashion sector has essentially impacted on the social and environmental indicators. Without a significant change to production processes and consumption patterns in fashion, the social and environmental costs of the sector will continue to mount and will create further challenges. How important is accessibility and the inclusivity here in bringing about a sustainable culture in the domain of fashion?
Thank you, Archana. Adding to those statistics, I would also like to say, I do not know how many people know that the textile sector's global emissions, which you talked about 2 to 8% of world's greenhouse gas emissions, they are actually more than the cumulative emissions of the aviation and shipping sector. Mm-hmm. It's really mind-boggling how important this sector is, not only for India, but globally, if we have to reach the targets that have been laid out in the Paris Agreement. And that's where this industry really becomes so very important. Now, the issue is basically that there are many innovations going on in this industry, but how do we scale them up? How do we scale them up to reach the 300 million workforce that you were talking about? And that's the biggest challenge. I think the social and the environmental aspects which you are talking about, and my mandate and my work, of course, is more on the environmental aspects. But since social, economic, and environment are the 3 pillars of sustainable development, we cannot ignore the social impact of such sectors and the kind of growth that is coming in. I'd like to highlight that the present generations and the present world's aspiration-based clothing has led to an upsurge in fast fashion. And I think that is the real big challenge and real big problem we are all facing. So many seasonal launches and changes in trends summer collections, winter collections, autumn collections coming in every 3-4 months, and the aspiration to live up to the Joneses, as they say, leading to early disposals. And if you're looking at the time limit of a particular shirt or a trouser or a skirt that one buys, the kind of time that it is worn before it gets disposed of is so less, that is leading to the big challenges that we are all facing. This challenge that we started with the Lakme Fashion Week and IMG Reliance, now called RISE, was certainly a very small step to begin with 3 years back in terms of bringing circularity into the whole design field, and also inspire youngsters and young designers to start thinking about looking at these very important aspects. And it's not only just the designing of clothes, it actually starts at the beginning of the supply chain from the fiber itself. And I think we need to make people aware of this whole sustainability element, which is so very important. It also needs that we all come together in the supply chain, whether it's the government or the industry or the consumers, across regions, and try to see how this value chain, which involves so many players of all sizes and markets, can come together to make fashion sustainable. In fact, I remember UNEP recently released a study which was called the Sustainability and Circularity in the Textile Value Chain, Global Stock Taking, that identifies a lot of these actions that can be taken and serve as a guide for moving towards sustainable fashion. In India, in fact, we are now working with the Ministry of Textiles very closely and with our partner Center for Environment Education to do a benchmarking for the Surat textile cluster, and also do a study on the traditional elements of sustainability in our handloom sector. I think within this whole perspective, we need to see that how does fashion industry move forward in the next 20 to 30 years to not only meet the Paris Agreement challenges, but also to meet those targets that each and every country has agreed to. I'm also reminded of a campaign we did recently, about 2 years back, just before COVID, with Masaba, the famous designer, who developed a series of dresses which was called Wear Plastic Out. And that was a very successful campaign where within a dress she had designed, she was able to build in a cloth bag as part of the dress to replace plastic bags when you go shopping. Now, it was a very simple idea. It became a very big hit. And I think ideas like this are the need of the hour to make our textile sector more sustainable.
So while you talked about the Paris Agreement, I'd like to share that, Arch College of Design and Business in the year 2020, Jan, before the COVID break, broke out, we had the Responsible Fashion Series, which was initiated. And this was with the four bigs, the UL, Domus, and IFM Paris and Parsons, that we hosted the Fashion Colloquium here in Jaipur. And we had a Jaipur Fashion Manifesto, which was signed then. And we had 15 countries and 4 continents who actually signed the Jaipur Fashion Manifesto. So very interestingly, there are a lot of advancement that's happening within the academia as well when you look at the industry, because ultimately it's the student community who are going to become the future leaders of the country. So it's very important that education equally addresses that. And while I see that, the Fashion Colloquia did talk about promoting active collaboration, knowledge sharing, strengthening harmonization, and looking at outreach and advocacy. If these are the areas that we did touch upon, I have this question for Pavithra. My question to her is, while India is one of the most culturally heterogeneous countries globally, and the fashion heritage is a way to hold effective dialogue amongst different cultures to create a shared and sustainable future. If this is the belief that we have in our traditional indigenous knowledge, how do we look at this indigenous knowledge playing a key role in bringing about sustainability?
I'd like to say the handloom industry or the handloom sector best embodies the SDG goals, because we use minimal capital and power, environment-friendly practices, and also it allows innovation to support the markets and trends. Having said that, I'd like to just say that looking back at our old systems and our indigenous systems, I mean, everything about the handloom is a lot sustainable, much before we use the word sustainable. So I have a 80-year-old man saying, from a village in Belgaum, saying, why is it so difficult for you people to understand and follow what we do? We don't harm Mother Earth. Every practice of ours, when they make the woolen blankets, is sustainable. So these, in pockets of India, you always hear this thing that comes back from the weavers. So our country has had lotus stem, stinging metal, colored cotton, every aspect of what you talk of modern things that can affect fashion is already there and is part of our culture, but has been lost. At this point, I'd like to bring in, when you're talking of sustainability, the man who's growing cotton and we're exporting it. Now we want him to move into other things like, okay, pineapple fiber. I mean, I first saw pineapple fiber in this regional design center which Kamala Devi had set up. And so we have a sari in 1960 done with pineapple fiber. So all that we need, and it's scientifically done, we need to revisit these things, use it, spread it, so that people's livelihood can be impacted. I mean, that is the best thing I think we would be able to give to the world and say we have so many people to give employment, and also be part of the forefront of what the fashion changes. That is a very important thing. So if we want the farmer to move from cotton into pineapple or agave or stinging metal, we also have to provide for their livelihoods. Okay, that is something that really is very important to me. So design is all about problem solving. And I think they are the basis of what our fashion industry goes, because without cloth, there's no fashion. And all cloth is done by brilliant hands with a brilliant mind. And we acknowledge and have to understand what they are going. So unless we give them a sustainable way out of saying, okay, less cotton, maybe you could go into pineapple, maybe you could go into it, so that it doesn't disrupt their income generation. And one thing, weaving is a teachable skill. So whether you know weaving or you do not know, it's teachable. So we've got so many people who need that respectable employment. And I look at handlooms as one of the only ways to do it. Fashion, if it concentrates on the handloom as cloth, as a basis for their fashion, a lot of the problems will be solved. If fashion focuses on handmade fabrics and handspun khadi, I think we would be able to address a lot of issues in the fashion industry, which won't depend on machine-made things which are soulless and which goes into landfills. Our handlooms are always given by 2-3 generations. It's passed down. So you have a conscious consumption. It's not that it's thrown into a landfill. And the Indian way of looking at it is a sari till it tears. It's used as nappies. We make baby hammocks, so we don't have crib deaths in India. We sustain the sari to the end, to even the threads being used to use it for embroidery.
So here I have this question now to Satyajit, that because Satyajit is an architect and a industrial designer, so he brings a complete new perspective, and his products I was looking at is why he uses flex and these kind of products to make his totes and and those accessories. It's very interesting that that imagination and creativity would require a lot of technological innovation towards becoming responsible and to improve the quality of life. So what do you think with the metaverse coming into space and fashion becoming increasingly engaging with NFTs, which will unlock a whole new possibility and experience for the fashion industry? What is the path towards reducing the environmental challenges that are already there, as we shared? So while these areas are new frontiers, as a technocrat, how do you see it?
Thank you, Archana. I think one of the things which I will pick up on is what was mentioned earlier is design is about problem solving. I think that is actually the essence and the key to all what's going to happen in the next 30 to 40 years. Um, uh, as much as handloom is one direction, the direction which we have taken across is why create new materials at all, right? There is enough and more on this planet, which is, you walk out and you'll see all kinds of materials. I mean, we use tarpaulin and things like that, but there is, every single time there is a new material which comes out. The key here is also when you mention fashion, typically when you see material which is recycled or upcycled, as we call it, it shouldn't look, it has to look stylish, it has to look cool. You mentioned NFTs, you mentioned art. It needs all of this if it can come onto the products where people can wear it and use it for a long time. So I think not using new products is probably one way of doing this. The second way is also combining the old and the new. What I mean by this is we're experimenting constantly with this. We're trying to use materials like flex and trying to weave it with cotton and with handlooms. Now that creates a completely different way of different material, different application. Things like I think for designers, it's such a responsibility to be able to literally look around and say, hey, this is going to waste, what can I do with it? That's what's going to really going to take us to the future. Specifically with you mentioned flex. Although flex is banned in so many other countries, India still hasn't gone down that route. And the amount of flex which comes out, it is mad. It is really mad. So one is creating products out of it. So one is making money out of products, but there's another different angle, which is the humanitarian angle, which we are trying to do is we're trying to make sleeping bags out of flex for the homeless, because it's got its own properties. It's waterproof. It gives enough warmth if it's lined properly. So we're going down that route as well to create tents and so on and so forth. So economy being the key part can also be taken in this direction. It's very interesting what all you can do with materials.
What do you see as a future, you as a designer in 2030? Have you really thought about that frontier? I mean, that front.
I see collaborations as a big key area from all fronts. So whether it's knowing, let's say, stalwarts who have been in the handloom industry. Now that I know her, I can reach out and I can, create something different. If I know more people whom I can collaborate with, it could be fashion experts, it could be industries which are willing, and I think that's happening slowly. That encourages, and also the volumes of waste, as we call it, can be utilized in a much and transformed into a more usable product in a much larger volumes. We are still very small, but these collaborations are going to be really key to the future.
Where do you see, I can open this question to any one of you, to really talk about, can fashion change the world? Because if our impact is so big and we are the largest employer, where do you see this whole game moving?
As you would have seen over the last decade or less, the whole debate has moved to environment, to climate change, and each and every action that is taken by any stakeholder, whether it's industry or government or civil society, there is certainly an immediate linkage with how is it going to help climate change adaptation or climate change mitigation. And from that perspective, certainly textile sector or the fashion sector, as you're mentioning, will need to play a very important role. And I think more important than also raising the awareness. And if the fashion industry, which catches so many eyeballs globally, can be the brand ambassadors for climate change, I think that is going to be a huge contribution that this industry can make. Apart from, of course, changing their whole processes and doing away with what even Satyajit mentioned of changing our fashion so frequently every few months. Apart from those mitigation kind of actions, I think awareness raising and brand ambassadorship of the fashion icons could be a big influence on how the world starts changing itself.
I mean, how inclusive is the fashion industry as a whole? I mean, we have a responsibility not to the most beautiful made garments that go out on the fashion in the fashion industry, but I think our responsibility also is to be able socially, and which is rooted. I mean, that we always should remember that there are so many people who've got these hand skills, have done things for generations. Also, we have to, if you talk about it as inclusive, we have to always remember the people who are not right there in the front of all the fashion industry, but are in the rural areas who are doing it. I think it's also our responsibility to find a balance. Where could we have both these kinds of different communities, one in the rural and one in the cities, being able to come together? That is also a big question mark that I think needs to be addressed.
While on one side, we're talking about who made my clothes, on the other side, it is the digital fashion, which is really picking up well. And they say the future is going to be digital fashion. So where do you see that this whole game of digital fashion becoming and going, while even with products like yours?
I think it is. I think it's the way forward. There's no doubt about this, and I think it's and as much as there are issues, and we need to address issues with the people in the rural areas. How to do it? Yes, we need to figure out a solution, but digital is the way forward. There's no denying it. I think that's something which we cannot walk away from it. But I think it's important is we need to have brand ambassadors. We need to have champions who, through digital fashion, can put forth all these things about sustainability. And I think the people who make the clothes, who manufacture the clothes, and so on and so forth, those need to be champions as well. And I'm coming from an industrial design aspect, I know, but I think it needs to trickle down from there.
And I think a lot of people today have become more followers of fashion rather than really understand that how fashion can really bring that true identity to each one of us. And where do you see the media, the fashion weeks, and the fashion magazines? How will they be accommodating these ideas of sustainability? Is there any kind of a policy framework or any kind of mobilizing that's happening at that front?
Okay, so I was just going to come to that, where the Circular Design Challenge itself was absolutely fabulous. And I think the 4th edition is coming up. I think that's great. I'll give you a small example. They also, during the fashion weeks, they help us set up a virtual shop and stuff like that, right? But the fact is that, not too many people buy it, because, we're still small, and so on and so forth. So I think whether it's policy framework or real-time connect with, it's almost like saying, like what we used to do in design school is connect with the industry during our last year in that sense. Mm-hmm. Is there something which can be done at the design school level where it starts off and then it connects into a much larger, you know what I'm saying? I think it's an involvement, it's a policy which needs to come if it has to make any impact as well.
I totally agree that if we are going to look at 2030 or 2050, we need to build the capacity of the young designers who are getting through this sector through NIFT or through other institutes that teach textiles and fashion technology. And I think that's, Archana, in the beginning, you talked about capacity building. And I think that is going to be a major area of work in the next many years. And your initial question about media, certainly media has a very important role to play. I was surprised when we did the Wear Out Plastic campaign with Masaba and launched it in Mumbai just about a month before COVID. In fact, it got so much of eyeballs that for 2 days it was number one issue on Twitter, and there was so much of response. So I think media can play a very, very important role.
So my last question here would be that, how do you say, what are your real challenges now while you're looking at infrastructures for 2050? Pavithra, what is your challenge today when you look at the artisanal community, how people are going to be embracing handlooms, because yes, they are not very, easy to maintain. Yeah.
I'm wearing a 150-year-old sari that doesn't need much ironing and no starching and has lasted for 150 years in a great shape for me to wear. So that itself is a great lesson to say it depends on how we structure the textile, how we plan to do that and keep that going. So it totally depends. Today, half of the time, the weavers are in competition with power loom, so they take shortcuts. But actually, our systems are, if we did plan that, it is there. There's another example I'd like to tell you about a sari that's called the Puja sari. Okay, we recreated that version. It's been in the market for 45 years. So whatever I do by way of design, it is an innovation and it's inspired by the old, but it has its own journey. So if it has fed people for 45 years, it is a success because it is beyond my name. Okay, so those kind of stories are something. I've got a natural fiber person who's got the Limca book records. See, as a designer, I can teach, I can train, I can collaborate with them. And I think that journey, if it is sustainable, it'll have its own thing, whether it's financial sustainability, social sustainability, and long-lasting textiles, So in that sense, I still say that there is a lot. We just need to look back and as designers, pick that out and put it out into the mainstream.
I see if we are moving forward and we are looking at 2050 and the textile industry and the fashion industry, I see three major action points or targets, I may say, voluntary though, for this whole industry. One, certainly I think we should achieve and try to achieve 100% circularity in the textile industry. And that's going to be a very important area of work for all stakeholders, whether the civil society, government, designers, supply chain. We need to have a very systematic and strategic move over the next 20, 30 years to circularity. And that's, in fact, the COVID-19 has reminded us again that circularity needs to be the hallmark of our work over the next 20, 30 years. And if we are able to move forward with the sustainable development goals, we should be really looking at it. The second big challenge and action point which I see is net zero emissions in a very forward-looking and timely manner by some of the major government sector stakeholders who should come together to look at this. And in fact, a lot of them came together in 2018 to commit to a climate action through the UNFCCC Fashion Industry Charter for Climate Action. I think that is something that needs to be scaled up, and that's where initiatives like I was talking about need to be really scaled up. So I think a lot of these stakeholders need to collaborate if we need to come up with a net zero emissions by 2050. And finally, and I think Pavithra mentioned a lot in her, and you also were mentioning, waste needs to be eliminated from textile value chain. And that's a very important aspect and a challenge for the next 20, 30 years. And I see in CDC also in the challenge, and outside that, I see a lot of designers trying to minimize waste or use waste for coming up with new innovative ideas. And I think that needs to be really scaled up quite substantially if what we call the UNEP circularity approach needs to be brought forward. And I think the basic principle should be reduced by design. And I think that's a very important principle we need to follow. So I'm very hopeful in the next 20, 30 years, we'll see a sea change in how this whole industry reinvents itself. And I think that work has already started. And I am very encouraged by the work that the other two panelists who are here are already doing. And these are our stars, these are our influencers, as you said, and these are the people who inspire each and every one.
I'd mention 2 points. One is collaborations. I keep on mentioning it because unless I know somebody who's doing something with, in, let's say, in Chile or any place, and those platforms are open, those platforms need to be more transparent. So collaborations through platforms. And the second is, I believe in the next 20 to 30 years, technology, which is manufacturing technology, which is stuff like 3D printing, and name stuff which is going to come out, is going to play a massive, massive role in reducing waste, in transforming waste or, things which otherwise seem useless and go into the landfill. They can make they're going to be some amazing stuff. You will have buildings coming out of paper or something like that, I think technology will play a massive role in changing the way we, deal with sustainability.
I think fashion has the power to change the world because the impact is huge. Clothes is what we love. It brings identity to us. It brings character to us. It brings that, that difference. It's a differentiator. And I think there's an opportunity for all of us to really reinvent the wheel, bring beneficial order into the space. I think there's a huge opportunity for India to really have a voice in design now, where design can really solve the problem and textile industry can reinvent itself while we are really producing for the world.
Be inspired. An innovation can change the world. All we need is passion, focus, and a desire to help. If you have an innovation, please send it to us at whatever stage it is in. Our panel of experts will assess it and help propel it towards reality. The sky is your limit. Don't wait. Mail us your idea or innovative thought at beinspired@teamworkarts.com.